is that St Anne's is different. Most colleges, I suppose, don't change very much. When most people go back to Christ Church or to New College, they go back to a place that seems to have stayed the same over the centuries. We do change. St Anne's looks different for each generation. Well, I can think what this place must have looked like in 1947, 1957, or even 1967. It must look utterly different now. And that really is, I think, because the character of this college has always been, ever since it was invented as the Society for Home Students, was that St Anne's would work out what it wanted to be for itself, generation by generation. And yet, by working out what it wanted to be for itself, something fundamental about its values would always remain unchanged. What we might think would be a long summer slumber. It's not quite like that, actually, because between now and the end of September, there will be 79 or 80 conferences taking place in this college. They will bring in a total this year of £1.75 million, money which is essential so that when the next generation of undergraduates arrive, we will be able to give them the tutorial-based education that we think defines what Oxford should be. And in October they'll turn up. It's strange to think that now they're just taking their A-levels and they'll have that neurotic wait until mid-August when they will find if they have their grades to come. And most of them will. And what's entertaining and very touching about this ritual is that they all arrive, as I'm sure all of you did, convinced that each of them is the mistake, the one that wasn't meant to get in, that everybody sitting next to them is cleverer than they are, and they make them look at each other, and I suggest this to them. And then you see over the next 3 years an extraordinary flourishing that takes place, and you realise the capacity of people at that age to stretch their minds in a direction they would never have thought possible when they began. And I think that, in a nutshell, is what we do for undergraduates. And now you might ask yourself, do they recognise these days the values they inherit, the values they've inherited from all of you on coming here? Above all, that battle which each of you in your generation fought for, the rights of women to an education at university, which now so easily can be taken for granted. And I think what's interesting about St Anne's is that men and women, if you talk to the young undergraduates today, they describe it in words and terms terribly similar to those which each previous generation talked about the college. They talk about how down to earth it is, how informal it is, how there's no snobbery here, how people here can be themselves, they're taken for what they are, and they're respected for what they are, and that gives them the confidence, even though often they come to the university on a path or from a background which is not usual. When they get here, they can really do extraordinarily well and realise their potential. And I think that every college in Oxford obviously has a sense of its own specialness, because that is the genius of the collegiate system. I think St Anne's not only has a sense of its own specialness, it has a sense of its own difference. To recognise St Anne's should incorporate female emancipation in a wider sense of intellectual emancipation. And that what we should be proud of is that the range of people who come to Oxford because St Anne's is here. I think St Anne's is always thinking ahead to what the university can become, what it needs to be true to itself as each generation changes. At the core of that, of course, is the tutorial system, that sense of individual connection, the fact that everyone who's here is here because somebody else chose them as someone they thought was worth teaching. And it's, I think, actually, in the young of St Anne's, you see a model of what Britain, an optimistic model of what Britain might become. And the interesting thing about St Anne's is how all the students say when they're here, and what they value about the place, is the range of people they find on their staircases, people they would never have met before, never have hoped to meet otherwise, who they get to know as friends, and that breaks down barriers between them. I talked earlier about the great strength of the university, as I imagine it must have been in the 1940s, when you had this range of generations here. And what we're doing here is we're building up a number of graduate students, because graduates and people doing master's courses are increasingly an important part of the modern university world. But it does mean that our community here now ranges between 18 and 25, rather as it must have done in the 1940s, and not just between 18 and 21. And I think that makes it a richer place. And I think what really matters in Oxford is what's always mattered in Oxford. And that's not the students who are here at the moment. It's not even the dons and the deeply distinguished researchers who spent their lives here. It's actually the successive generations who pass through generation after generation. 3 or 4 years is a very short time. And yet, as a result of those years, people in big ways and small, in all sorts of different avenues, make a fundamental difference to the world, as you have all done, and gone on to make society better. And that's what Oxford is for, it seems to me. All those qualities that you learn as an undergraduate, clarity of expression, rational scepticism, tolerance, curiosity, and above all, that individual value that in learning, you learn to live well. Those, I think, are enduring values, and values which everyone across the generations can see matter and matter most.